Hi, everyone. I am Lachelle Corley, and I am your host of The Other Side of This podcast. For those of you who are new, I'd like to tell you what you're getting yourself into. This podcast believes in empowering the listener through the lived experiences of our special guests. Our guests have been have experienced have been transformed by devastating experiences. However, due to their resilience, they are here today to tell you how they made it to the other side. The topic that we're going to talk about today, or the focus of this episode, is honoring the voice and courage of male survivors. As this is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, I want to just acknowledge the importance of survivors, whether male or female, to be able to tell their story, because by doing so, it helps them to restore dignity into their humanity. Most of the education that is provided on this topic is geared towards women. And this is also why I want to place the spotlight on the voices of unheard men in this predicament. I like to also give you some data. I believe that's important. So, just to provide you with some, as it pertains to domestic abuse and how it impacts men in the United States, more so male survivors. From the CDC, there was a survey completed on March 16th, and it's titled Intimate Partner Violence Prevention. It indicated that approximately 1 in 10 men in the United States experience contact sexual violence, physical violence, and or stalking by an intimate partner in their lifetime. The impact of these forms of violence or on male victims, included fear, concern for safety, symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder, and more. Many victims experience domestic violence before the age of 18. There's also some other data I like to provide you. 1 in 4 men in the United States have been slapped, pushed, or shoved by their intimate partner in their lifetime. Approximately 1/3 have experienced some form of expressive aggression, and 4 in 10 have experienced coercive control. Nearly 1 in 7 men in the United States have experienced severe physical violence by their intimate partner in their lifetime. Of this 13%, 9% of these men have been hit with a fist or with an object. And of the 13%, only 4 reported being kicked. The last statistic I would like to provide to you is that victimized men are less likely than women to report this type of abuse, and only 13% go to law enforcement to report this form of treatment. So this is why it is imperative that we put the spotlight on this topic. Before we proceed in, more into our conversation, I would like to provide a disclaimer. The nature of this conversation pertaining to survivors of domestic violence may be triggering for some members of the audience. Please step away if this information becomes too overwhelming, and do what you need to do to calm yourself, even if that means calling someone and, connecting to support. The purpose of this particular episode is to and provide you with honor the victims and provide you with an example of an overcomer, of someone who has been restored from this experience. Also, I want to empower you with resources and strategies to hopefully save your life, or someone who you know is a victim of domestic violence, also save their life. So, I will like to introduce you all to our very special guest, Mr. Jared Whitaker. Welcome, Jared.
Yeah, thanks, Michelle. Thanks for having me.
Yes, yes. I would like to give you all a some information about Jared's background. Um, Jared is from the UK, and he went from being a CEO in the corporate world for 20 years to now being a part of the mission field of helping repair men and also help them to navigate through experiences such as domestic abuse, mental health struggles, and false allegations. Jared is serving this population of men through his books. His latest book, which came out October 1st, is titled The Forgotten Fathers, The Lost, and trauma of parental alienation. He is also a survivor, an advocate, a domestic violence coach, and also the founder of Strong Men. It's a YouTube channel to support men. So, are you ready to dive into the conversation, Jared?
Yep, ready. Let's go.
Let's go. So, my first question to you is, how was your relationship before the abuse started to occur?
Yeah, so I'll answer it in a long way. So at the time, I thought it was kind of normalish. It wasn't perfect, but I thought maybe it was. That's how relationships are. You have to work at them, and they're hard. And it wasn't like just amazing from the start. But now that I'm out of it and I've learned everything I've learned about abuse through writing my books and all the research, I realized that my relationship was always abusive.
Mm.
And this comes back to understanding, with abuse, you don't go on a first date with someone, they sit down, they punch you in the face, because you're never going to go on a second date with them.
Right.
But abuse isn't just physical, it's all the things that build up to it. And abusers are clever in that they layer it on and they work on you slowly. So they get control over you to a certain degree, and then they go to the next step and they get more control, more control. So they always like build it up. And I realized from the very beginning of my relationship there were tactics being used like isolation and gaslighting and triangulation and criticism and things like that, building up from the very beginning of that relationship. So when it did become physical a few years later, even though then you're like, oh no, I'm in an abusive relationship, it was actually abusive way, way, way before that, and it started from the very beginning. And you'll find a lot of abusive relationships start that way. They start from the very beginning with love bombing, and
Yeah.
from there they move on. So I don't think I ever had part of the relationship that wasn't abusive. It was just more more active abuse, I guess you could call it, as it got further along.
Yeah. And just hearing you say that, it makes me think of how you really never really knew this person because they were literally putting on a performance for you, and then until the mask came off. So it's good to, be able to recognize that, um you were just slowly being drawn into something
Yeah.
uh that you weren't initially, looking for in this relationship. You were hoping the person would be, a good person, someone to build a life with and really, really care about you, and not so much someone who's drawing you in to control you.
Yeah, well, I don't think anyone goes out looking for an abusive relationship. It's
Yeah,
everyone thinks they're going into something nice, and that's what gets preyed on by abusers is they know people are looking for that.
yeah. My next question is, what were some warning signs you ignored about your partner's behavior, and why did you ignore it?
Uh, yeah, everything, I guess. But if I look back, probably in the beginning, definitely isolation was a big one where I was trying to, she was trying to stop me seeing friends, trying to stop me seeing family. And in the beginning, things get positioned in such a way that it always seems like it's in your best interest, like they're looking out for you. So it was like, oh, you don't want to go see your friends because you need downtime, you need alone time because you were used to living alone. Now we're living together, and you need that time for yourself, for your mental health. So you don't want to go and do that. And it gets positioned in a way that it's looking after you, but really it's just trying to isolate you away. And I think in the beginning, you don't want to rock the boat. You're in a new relationship. You don't want to be too like, no, I'm doing this anyway. So you kind of go along with things. And you don't push back too much. And I mean, that's the kind of person I am. I'm not very confrontational, and so just kind of went along with it, ignored it, and thought, okay, well, yes, of course, if you're in a new relationship, you're only going to spend time with your new partner, no one else. That's just the way it is. And you convince
Yeah.
yourself of these things. But yeah, there was a field worth of red flags that I ignored.
Yeah. Yeah, and it sounds like, sometimes you hear like when you're able to step back and look at the experience after the abuse has occurred for some time, you recognize what looked like care in the beginning was actually control.
Yeah,
What looked like support actually was surveillance, So um again, it's the wisdom that you gain after the fact. from these experiences.
Yeah.
Despite gender, from your experience, what are the characteristics of an abuser and victim of domestic abuse?
So abusers, and again, yeah, it doesn't matter if it's male or female. It's all about control. So it's around being controlling, being domineering, being manipulative. Um, abusers are always the same in that they are abusive, but also if you say anything to them, they're the biggest victim on the planet. Like you can't dare question them because otherwise, they're very dramatic in that regards. But yeah, it's all about being in control, everything, and no matter what kind of abuse you're talking about, whether it's emotional abuse, physical abuse, financial abuse, it all comes down to that one word, which is control. So they all share that, and it's really interesting because I I do a lot of work with men, obviously, but I also talk to a lot of women. I've interviewed female survivors for my books, and it's the same, whether it's men or women. It's the same tools, the same techniques that abusers use, the same approach they take. It follows the standard kind of roadmap almost, where it's the love bombing into the isolation, into and it just follows the same path, and it's so textbook, to the point
Mhm.
where they even say the same things. And I've had people from the US, the UK, Australia, Africa, all saying the same thing to me, like, "Oh, that's exactly what my partner said to me, male or female, doesn't matter."
Yeah,
Um, so it's really obvious when you look at an abuser, they're all the same basically. Um, but when you look at a victim, it's a lot more difficult because you can't really give a profile of a victim. If you say victim of domestic abuse, everyone thinks like small, meek, timid. They don't, especially when it comes to men. Like a guy like me, who's 6'2", 120 kilograms, big guy. Then no one's going to look at me and think, oh, you could possibly be a victim of abuse at the hands of a woman. But
yeah,
it does. It's not about what you are. It's about like who the other person is and what they've done to you. But I do find that most survivors I've spoken to are very empathetic people. They're decent people. They're calm people. They kind of, yeah, don't want to rock the boat. They go with the flow kind of thing. And it's just easier, I guess, to control them. A lot of people, but not all, have had some previous trauma or some previous past experience that makes them feel like they're looking for love or something like that. But yeah, it's so hard because anyone can be the victim of abuse.
yeah.
It's more so looking at the profile of abusers and how they share these common tactics.
Yeah. And it's interesting that you say the tactics and the common tactics, because a lot of times when we hear about the abuser, we hear, like you said, like there are certain things they do, like no matter where they are in this world, they have these certain patterns of behavior. Um, and because a lot of that behavior is in their ability to control and have power, when we think about like characteristics, narcissism and things of that nature, you know, a narcissistic personality is someone who has these rigid patterns of behavior that is tied to a sense of control and power over individuals. And there's different versions of the narcissism. Is on a spectrum. But the main goal is self-serving, and there's a deception aspect to it. And when we're also talking about just abuse in general, um it does not is not done because the person wants to maintain unity. It's done because there is some level of control that the person is losing, and
Yeah,
they are doing whatever's necessary to keep you um caged, keep you confined to them.
yeah, yeah. There's no such thing as a good abusive relationship. Where both partners are equal and you're happy or whatever. There's always that abuser puts himself above you, and you can never have a good relationship where one person puts themselves above the other person. So it just automatically can't work. But for them, it's not about making the relationship work, like you said. It's about making everything work for them.
Yeah. Yes. My next question is, what did domestic abuse look like for you?
So everything. So like I mentioned earlier, it didn't start off physical, so it kind of went from early days, which was very much focused on isolation, stopping me seeing friends and family. Um, then kind of in came criticism, and it started off small, like, oh, you dressed like this, but maybe you'd look better if you dressed like this, and very much trying to change, like, again, controlling how they wanted you to look and act and things like that. And it started off, yeah, criticism, um, and things like that, and then it just escalated over time for the first few years. So it got more and more aggressive, vocal, nasty, to the point where she was in absolute rages and would like smash things, smash my phone, smash computers, smash glasses, things like that, scream, shout, but already by this point she had good control over me. And it just escalated until one day, I think it was about 3 or 4 years in, I was sitting at my desk working and she was screaming and shouting behind me, and I said something, like whatever, or I'm not dealing with this now, or something like that. And this hand just came around and smashed me in the face. And because nothing happened from that point, like nothing bad happened to her, I didn't call the police, or, I didn't hit her back or anything like that. So to her, she got away with it. And then
Yeah.
from that point, the physical stuff escalated as well. So it escalated to not just one hit, it was multiple hits, escalated to like smashing plates on heads, to throwing things, to hitting me with objects like curtain poles and, whatever was available, throwing things, kicking. Um, she grabbed my shirt and ripped them off me, to the point where it then got to using knives, trying to take knives out and stab and things like that. So it just escalated. And I mean, if I hadn't got out when I got out, probably would have escalated to the point of her killing me, because it
Wow.
just escalated over time. And
Yeah.
there's only so much escalation you can get, really.
Yeah. And I thank you for sharing that. And I'm I'm also sorry to hear that you've been through that. Just to hear to see how abusers tear at your dignity, tear at your sense of self-worth until um you feel like nothing. um Another thing is abuse. The abuser's abuse is a choice. No one deserves to have this type of treatment, and these are the signs of a unhealthy, unsafe relationship. This is also the sign of an individual that needs some help. And a lot of times when individuals are victims, they go through those processes of justifying the behavior, or um, trying to excuse what the person is doing, especially if certain things come to light. If the person is yelling at you in public and things of that nature, you might try to explain away their behavior, but that too is just a sign of how much control they have over you when
Yeah,
you're justifying the behavior.
yeah.
So
You protect them because it almost embarrasses you for people to see what's happening to you, so you end up protecting them, and it's a cycle.
yeah, the psychological control.
Yeah.
Um, my next question is, what support did you seek out?
Uh, very little. So because of all the isolation that had happened early on, and I didn't really have anyone then, I was isolated from friends and family. There was one family member that I did try and reach out to for help and try and explain what was going on. But the problem is, when you look at the tools and tactics of an abuser, a big um, a big tactic they use is blame shifting and preempting. So something happens, they're quickly on the phone to people telling them, "Oh, this actually happened," and they spin it from the other way around. So by the time you reach out to someone and say this is happening, they go, "No, that's complete rubbish. They've already told me what's really going on. You're the problem." So there was no real help there. Um, I did try ring a helpline, and the problem is, like, if you look at the UK, there's hundreds of organisations for helping domestic abuse against women. So that kind of thing, but very few for men. And I didn't know about any of them back then. So I ended up bringing this generic domestic abuse helpline in the UK, and the questions, if a man rings in, are very much geared to basically telling him he's the abuser and he's ringing in to make excuses for himself. So I ended up leaving that call feeling worse than what, and getting no help from it. I did at one stage. I went to the police station because I thought I'm going to go in and report it in person that this is happening to me, and they literally laughed at me. They laughed at me
Mm.
and told me to get out because they said, "Oh, look at you, come on, man, you're joking, like get out," and threw me out. And I was too embarrassed to say, "Well, no, this is true," so I left. Um, but I mean, it's disgusting. I've heard that from so many guys I've spoken to about the same kind of thing where they've tried to go to the police and the police just laugh at them because they're big, big strong men shouldn't be coming in and saying this rubbish because how can they possibly be abused? But it's down to education that these people need to take it seriously.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to hear how you mentioned how the abuser causes the problem, creates the problem, and then goes to everyone, and now they're the victim.
Yeah,
And again, that is also, behaviors that one can see with individuals who have narcissistic tendencies. And I'm saying more narcissistic tendencies in line more with a disorder, not just the traits of narcissism.
yeah.
Um, how did you respond to people saying, just leave her, just get away from her?
It's well, at the time, so not many people said to me, just leave, but a lot of people afterwards, when I did get out and told them what had happened, said to me, well, why didn't you just leave? And that, to me, is possibly the dumbest, most damaging question someone can ask someone who's been a victim of domestic abuse. And literally, the title of my first book is Why Didn't You Just Leave Them? Because of that, because it's so harmful and so ignorant, really, because it's not a case of, oh, this isn't nice, I'm just going to walk out the door. You're psychologically broken, you're emotionally broken, mentally broken. You're probably being financially controlled, so you don't even have any money that you could just walk out the door and go stay somewhere else. Um, there's things like trauma bonding. It's not just a case of you just decide one day, oh, that's it, and I'm walking out the door. And if you've got children, that's even harder. So these people who say these things like, and actually in that book I give a whole list of these common things that people hear, like, why didn't you just leave them? Oh, you must have liked it, or you can't have been that bad. One of the worst that I hated was, oh, you're just as bad as each other. And
Mm,
just these saying these things to people. If you don't know what to say and you don't know what you're talking about, don't say anything, because it's
yeah,
more damaging to say stupid things like
yeah.
that. And yeah, it's that literally is what spurred me on to kind of write that first book. Was actually at a barbecue one afternoon, and we were talking about someone else in an abusive relationship, and someone I know said, "Oh, why doesn't she just leave him?" And I thought, "Oh my God, you don't know what you're talking about," and actually went and started writing the first book from that.
Yeah, so yeah, just hearing the complexities of all of this. And also you mentioned something that I think is important is not, of course, the victim, but then when other individuals who are dependent possibly on both people are involved, like children, you
Yeah,
know, and a lot of times these abusers, what they do is they create that triangulation, and where in order for them to, manipulate the situation for their desired outcome, they will now, sow these false accusations into the kids about their parent. And that in itself creates emotional wounds in these children that they didn't ask for. You know,
yeah,
they begin to now doubt the safety of being with that other parent. It also can have them to have loyalty conflicts amongst each other. One child might say, okay, I'm trying to defend mom. Another kid, no, I'm trying to defend dad. Um, and it's damaging to their development as well, because children do not have the cognitive capacity to fully understand adult conflict you know
no,
so when adult pulls kids into these type of conflicts, they're not doing it from a place of loving the kids. They're doing it from a place of division, trying to divide the kids away from one of the parents for their own gain. And
yeah,
this is the deception that is behind these type of manipulative interactions.
yeah. It's why I wrote my new book on parental alienation, because it's such a big topic that it needed its own kind of book rather than just a chapter in a book on domestic abuse because I mean, it's child abuse. If you think
Yes,
it's
it is.
complete child abuse, it causes mental health issues with the children
Yes.
later in life. There's plenty of stats showing how it affects kids that go through this. I mean, it's just pure evil, right? It's these abusers have this toolkit that they're using to do their evil already to you,
Yeah.
but then they don't. The kids aren't kids to them. They're not children. They're not something to love. They're just another tool in the box to use, and like their best tool because that's
Yeah.
using kids against you is like their trump card kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. They use the kids as like a pawn
Yeah,
to now try to, punish you, especially with trying to separate you from the child or distort the psychological abuse, distorting how the child sees you as a parent. Is
yeah,
is it's a horrible thing for people to do.
yeah.
Absolutely. Um, how can just leaving be dangerous? And what advice would you give to family and friends to support victims in this stage of the relationship if they're considering leaving?
Yeah. So like I said, just leaving is not a option. Just leaving is not an option, right? You can't just get up one day and walk out. And people think, oh yeah, of course you can. But people who say that, they just don't know. There's things you have to do if you're going to, because it's not just about getting out of an abusive relationship. It's about getting out, staying out, and then being able to move on. So there's steps you have to go through. And anyone can walk out the door, but most people end up coming back because of various reasons, whether it's that trauma bond, they financially dependent on the person, they've got nowhere else to go, they're isolated already from friends and family, they've got no one they can go and stay with. But so just leaving can cause more problems because if you don't get out and stay out and you get pulled back in, you're going to get punished for leaving in the first place. They're going to be worried what you've said to people, what you're going to do. I mean, I interviewed for my third book. I interviewed a female survivor who managed to get out and stay out, and she was saying she couldn't get out in the beginning because he said that if she tried to leave, he'd kill her children.
Hmm.
So she was so scared of what he would do, and she knew what he was capable of, obviously. So she didn't leave. And her words to me was, "Well, it's better the devil you know." When I was at home and he was doing all the horrible things to me, I knew
Yeah.
where he was and I knew what he was doing, but I knew my kids. He wasn't going to do that to my kids or my parents or whatever. So getting out is a lot more, and there's a lot of preparation you have to do, and a lot of practical things like, do you have evidence if you need it? Do you have money saved up? Do you have somewhere to go? It's practical stuff as well as all the emotional and mental things. And I think the important thing, like you said, for friends or family or people that need to support someone in this thing is they need to understand what's going on because otherwise they're going to come and say stupid things like, oh, why didn't you just leave them? But if they understand all of these things, all of these tactics, all of these tools, all of these different types of abuse, they can better help and say, here's what I can help you with. And if they understand the practical things like, okay, you're out, you come live with me. Now you need to file this form for divorce and you need to put this in place. You need to change your password on your social media. If they understand those practical things, they can help the person through all of that. So it's really about education for all of us. Education for the victims to understand these things, but education for everyone to
Yeah.
understand if they see a victim, how to help them.
Yes. And I think your book, The Indifference of Good Men, I'm over there looking at it now.
Yeah,
Um, I think it is a well written book. It is not just for, men, but also it can apply to women. And I think you do a great job explaining just that point, how you as a family member or a friend can help victims by being educated, by knowing resources, by believing what they're telling you, and not trying to force them to make a decision you would make, but meeting them where they are and providing them with resources along the way, because this is a very complex, as you're hearing from Jared, this is a very complex dynamic, and it's a very complex form of control that it goes mind, body, and spirit. It cuts through all of that in these victims.
yeah.
What has been the most challenging aspect of your journey, Jared?
Um, I mean, it was all challenging, but probably the hardest thing that I personally ever had to deal with was something I always call learning to hear with my own voice again. So when you're in an abusive relationship and they basically take over everything, they take over, you know, all aspects of your life, but they also take over your mind, and
Mm,
you hear with their voice basically. And when I left the relationship, I was still hearing with her voice, not my voice. I couldn't be myself, and I couldn't think, have my own thoughts. And um, I actually caught myself years later. Um, some simple example. So I do strongman, like I compete in competitions and things like that. And I had a competition coming up, and I wanted to get myself a new pair of like the neoprene undershorts that you wear so they don't get damaged when you got all the heavy weights and stuff on them. And I was sitting online and I was looking at these shorts, and the ones I wanted were about £40. That's about $55, $60. And the voice in my head said to me, "You don't deserve to spend that much money on yourself." And I was like,
mm,
"Oh, okay, I'm not going to get them." And then I realized all of a sudden, I was like, "Hang on, that wasn't me that just said that. That was her voice years later telling me that I don't
yeah,
deserve to have these." And then I thought, well, you know what? I'm CEO of a company. I work really hard. I make good money. Why don't I deserve this? And I bought them for myself. And then I realized at that point that I was hearing still not my own voice, but her voice. And actually, I started with a new therapist after that, and we worked on that like quite a bit. And I don't hear that anymore. But it's
yeah,
that learning to hear yourself and who you really are rather than what they try to turn you into and what they wanted you to be. So it's really important. It's such a hard thing. And sometimes you don't even realize it's there. But as soon as you can
yeah.
start being yourself and hearing your own voice, it's a big, powerful thing.
Yeah, and just hearing you say that, it makes me think of um, how their voice becomes your inner critic. It's almost like I think of like a tormentor, tormenting, being tormented in your own mind. And this is how this abuse is psychologically damaging.
Yeah,
But it's so good to hear that you have done the work that you needed to do to restore and reclaim your peace of mind. You know, and this is why we're having this talk because this is how you restore yourself. A lot of times, I'm not going to say all victims, but when people violate us, sometimes we may look to them to repair what they've done wrong, but the repairing is up to us. And so to hear you say, I went to a therapist, I spoke to someone, um, to restore dignity back into myself, um, is necessary. So again, connect with that support you need because it is a long journey. Once you get out, you still have repairing to do from the damage that you've incurred from being violated, whether
yeah,
it's been 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. Like, there's an impact, and it's
yeah.
important to get the help you need.
Yeah, and I think, and I've written about this in my books, that there's help you can get, there's support networks, there's organizations, there's friends, there's family, there's therapists, there's counseling, there's everything else. But the number one thing that is going to help you and is going to, you know, bring all that together is you.
Yeah,
And you have to be willing to put in the work and do it. And it's not whenever I get a lot of people reach out to me and they say, "Oh, give me like a tip," and what they're looking for is like a quick fix for solving their life. And I always say to them, there's no quick fix. There's no magic bullet to, cure all of this. It's long and it's hard road, but you'll get there, and you
yes,
can get there. But you have to put the work in, unfortunately, and but it's worth it.
yeah, yeah. You can make it to the other side.
Yeah.
Um, what do you think about the stigma surrounding domestic violence?
Yeah. So I think there's two different stigmas I'll talk about. So one is the stigma around domestic abuse in entirety, and then there's a separate stigma around men that I'll talk about. So domestic abuse is such a weird one because it's this horrible, horrible thing, right? It's pure evil. I mean, it's the only way to really describe it, that
Oh yeah,
this someone's doing this to you. And the example I always like to give is, let's say you're at work one day and you say to someone, "Oh, I'm going home now, but I'm going to stop at the bank and cash a check on my way home." and you go to the bank, and then you come in the next day and you say, "Oh my God, I went to the bank to cash my check, and while I was there, three armed men with machine guns came in and they started robbing the place, and I was terrified and I was so scared and it was horrible, and one of them hit me with his gun, and blah 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 blah." No one in the world is going to turn around and be like, "Oh my God, well, what did you do to make them rob you?" And,
Yeah.
whatever. They'll be like, "That is so terrible. Are you okay? Do you need help?" But when it's domestic abuse, it's always victim blaming. Well, what did you
Yeah.
do to make them angry? What did you do to deserve that? Or did you push them? Why didn't you just leave? It's your fault. It's the victim. So there's this whole stigma around it that instead of looking at it as some evil, horrible person is doing something terrible to someone, whether it's male, female, doesn't matter. This is a
Yeah.
terrible person doing something to someone who does not deserve this to be done to them. You blame the victim, and you don't look at it and be like, "Oh my God, someone's doing something terrible to you." So that stigma really needs to change. That it's not about victim blaming. Asking things like, "Why didn't you just leave?" is victim blaming. It's your fault. Why aren't they asking them? Why didn't you just stop being abusive?
Right.
So
Yeah.
and then when it comes to men, there's the second layer where men aren't meant to be abused. Men are big and strong and protectors, and so there's this other stigma where men feel they can't come forward and say this because it's humiliating and it's embarrassing, and female abusers prey on that. And they know. I used to be told all the time, if you try to say anything to anyone, I'll just say it was you. They'll believe me because you're the man. Everyone's going to
Yeah.
laugh at you. They're going to think you're pathetic if you say anything. So it gets played on. So there's two stigmas that need to be broken. One is abuse is not the victim's fault; it's the abuser's fault. And
Yes.
second of all, anyone can be abused. It makes no difference who you are, what color, what race, what religion. Nothing. Anyone can be the victim of abuse.
Yeah. How can society better support male victims of domestic abuse and domestic violence?
Well, I think number one is by believing they can be the victims of domestic violence, right? So that's kind of the thing, and changing this stigma that, oh, it men can't be this, and it's okay if a man gets hit. No, think about it from TV shows, right? Most TV shows, like, you know, it's so funny when, like, the wife hits the husband on the head with a frying pan or something, or he makes a joke to her about some other woman, and then he comes out like purple and with slings on. That's hilarious. That's comedy.
Right.
But other way around wouldn't be funny, would it? So
Right.
it needs, just this whole shift needs to change. To again, it's anyone can be the victim of this, and making victims in general feel that it's okay to come forward, making men realize they don't have to be embarrassed about this, and it can happen, and it's nothing to do with how manly they are or how masculine they are or anything. So just making it this open topic that people are aware about, educated about. And I think it's that society needs to be educated more. I do think these topics need to be taught to high school level children, like 16, 17, 18-year olds, because they're going to go off into the world, into, longer term relationships now. And they need to know what to look out for, what to be aware of. So there's a lot of education, I think, globally needed on this topic.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting you mentioned teenagers. There was a survey completed by the CDC about teenage dating violence, and they found that 1 out of 12 teenagers experience domestic violence. And
Yeah.
they are under 18. So this is definitely needed. Another area of society that needs to probably do some changing is within the court system. A lot of times, especially if the abuser is a female, there could be false allegations, reported on behalf of that person. And the court is a lot of times um, leaning towards the woman because she's for lack of a better way of explaining it, the weaker one. The guy is stronger. He should be able to defend himself. There's no way she's making this up. So even having our judicial systems, the police and law enforcement, really being aware that no, women at times weaponize these entities to their advantage to keep control over their victims.
Yeah. I mean, there's that whole thing of innocence until proven guilty, but that is just not the case.
Yeah.
When it comes to, I mean, I've I'm not so aware of how it is in the US. I have a vague idea that it's quite similar to how it is here. But in the courts here, and with the police and the court systems, they have a thing in place called believe all women. So if a
Mm,
woman says something happened, they take it as it happened. And it's very much if a woman accuses you of domestic abuse or whatever, it's up to you to prove your innocence, not up to them to prove your guilt. So you are guilty until proven innocent, not the other way around. And
yeah.
I mean, you can see the vice. And again, it comes down to education because all the old education that used to be done for courts and social workers and police and that was all based on the notion that men were perpetrators, females were victim. And I mean, if you look at all the actual training material they use for the Duluth model, which is what they get trained on, it's actually all worded that way. When he abuses her, she, and it's all gendered
Yeah.
language, and it's very much men abuse, women are victims. And they're not educated enough to have this new idea that actually anyone can be and people could be lying. And
Right.
the problem is as well with a lot of these kind of things, they don't go through criminal court, they go through family courts. So it's to do with like child arrangements or divorce or things like that. And family courts aren't evidentiary based hearings. So they're
Yeah.
just kind of taking what people are saying. And so people just say whatever they want, and it's not like evidence. I went into court one day and my ex during this court proceeding had put in a document how I had tried to murder her,
Mm,
how the police arrested me for attempted murder. When they took me back to interrogate me, I confessed, right? I said, yeah, 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 you're right, you got me. I tried to murder her. And they said, that's very naughty. Please don't do it again. And they let me go. And this
mm,
is what she put in her official documents. Now, a 4-year-old could read that and think this is not true, right?
yeah.
But because she said it, they took it as serious. Instead of
Hmm.
going, well, where's the police record? Because it never happened. It was completely fabricated. It was never
Yeah.
arrested for it, nothing. So instead of looking at it and going, is there an associated police record? Okay, no, you're lying. Therefore, you're in trouble because you're committing perjury. They don't do any of that. Um, and it's the court system just needs a complete revamp. And I know every man I speak to about this says this. Every woman I speak to about this says this. Everyone's in agreement. The courts are not fit for purpose when it comes to this kind of thing.
Yeah. And like with the false accusations, it does seem like you're guilty until you are able to prove your innocence. And
Yeah,
in the United States, it is supposed to be innocent until proven
yeah,
guilty as well. So yeah. Um, what role has education played in your healing journey?
massive, 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 massive. Like, um, and when I started writing my first book, that Why Didn't You Just Leave Them? That's when I really started probably healing the most because I started doing a lot of research and a lot of learning into all these different things that we're discussing, like gaslighting and love bombing and triangulation. And as I was learning about each of these things and how they're used, I could look back at my relationship and go, okay, that's what was done there. I didn't actually need to feel guilty for that because this was what they were doing here, and this was happening to me, not
Yeah.
blaming myself. And it took a long time learning that. And I think the more I learn and the more other people I talk to and hear their similar stories and things like that, it really helps you understand that something was done to you.
Right.
And I've got this thing that I say to people, and it's very important, and it's very important they listen to the whole thing because if they only listen to the first half, they're going to get it all wrong. There's two major steps, and it has to be two to healing fully from this. And when I say healing fully, you never fully heal, but healing to the best of your ability.
Yes.
Step one is you need to get to a point where you can forgive yourself for all the things you think you did, that all the things surrounding this abusive relationship, and you can forgive yourself for all of those things and let it go. Then, once you're at that point, there's a lot more healing that needs to happen. And eventually, you get to a second most important point where you realize actually you didn't have anything that you needed to forgive yourself for because you didn't do anything wrong. That person is the person to blame, not you.
Yeah.
You're a victim. Again, back to the bank robbery thing. You don't have to forgive yourself for being involved in a bank robbery. Exactly the same as abusive relationship. You don't have anything to forgive yourself for, but unfortunately, you have to go through that process to get to that second point.
Yeah. And I think what you just said was well said. This happened to you. You know, And telling your story, this is why telling your story is important, because every time you share what happened to you, you're saying like this was something really bad, and I really believe that if people want to be spoken well of, they should behave in a way that they can be spoken well of. And
Yeah.
so when people make a choice, because abuse is a choice, manipulation is a choice, when people make a choice to behave that way and you don't speak up and you don't share how it's impacted you, you sit with that pain. And it's kind of like you give comfort to what they've done. But when you speak up, again, you restore yourself. You put yourself back together piece by piece, and you make yourself stronger from that experience because this happened to you, and you're not running from it. You're
Yeah.
bringing it to the light, you're exposing it, and then you're doing something about it to help you move forward in a better way.
And it's amazing the more you can stand up and share your journey and your pain and the things you've overcome, the more it gives other people around you the strength to do the same.
Yeah,
So when I started writing the first book, like I said, I do strongman, and the gym I train at is like it's it's not a fancy health club. It's like a factory with walls and lots of weights in, and everyone who trains there is pretty much a bodybuilder, a power lifter, a strongman. So it's all like serious strength. So most of the guys there are big, muscly guys. And when I started writing the first book, and I started talking openly about it to people I was at the gym with, at least 10 different guys came up to me. And these are big, big guys, monsters that you think,
yeah.
oh, and they all like, this happened to me and I went through
Mhm.
this. And they started opening up and they could all open up and share. But it took me making that first move to
Yeah.
help them then open up and do it. So you give other people strength by stepping forward. So it's good to do that as well.
Yes, I'm a big believer that pain produces power, and power produces this place of gratitude, this place of impact, this place of purpose. And from your journey, you have been living that out, from the corporate world to the mission field of, again, now helping men learn how to put themselves back together. And if you didn't have this experience, it was devastating and unfortunate, but look where it has brought you in your life journey today.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, when we are having challenges in our lives, there is good that can come from it, and it doesn't seem that way up front, but if we just do our work, we can find, I call it treasure, we can find a treasure in our pain. And this is one of the treasures for you, Jared, being able to spread your story and help people. And I'm just hoping that someone is being encouraged by what you've said so far.
Yeah.
uh,
And if you had interviewed me 5 years ago, I would have said life sucks and it's horrible and it's never going to get better and I've been through hell and it's only going to get worse and life's not
yeah,
worth living. And you know I was, when I was in my abuse relationship, I planned my suicide, so I was at the lowest possible point that you could get to in life.
yeah,
And now 5 years later, I've gone through this. I've completely changed. I'm out of the corporate world after 2 decades, and I'm writing, which is always actually what I wanted to do. I studied English at university and always wanted to be a writer, but I was too scared to.
yeah,
So I'm doing what I've always wanted to do. I'm in an incredibly happy relationship. We got married 2 months ago.
yeah,
I'm if you had asked me 5 years ago, never in a million years would I have thought it, but I'm so happy. And, I know I had to go through all of that to get to that point, but I wouldn't change a thing because I'm where I'm meant to be now. And, so it might look terrible at the time, but if you just keep putting in the work, it can get better.
yeah. And again, it's good to hear that you decided to, even when you were at your lowest and contemplating, you know, your life, you decided to continue to press forward, and look how things have come together now. So don't give up, don't lose hope, don't lose hope, don't lose hope, because the possibility of being transformed is there. If you keep going, get the help and support you need, you can be transformed in a better way from situations like this.
Yep.
My last question. I'm not ready to stop this interview. I'm not ready. But my last question is, what advice would you give to a man who is currently a victim of domestic abuse or domestic violence?
Um, I think the advice would be for a man, for a woman, for anyone is learn, right? Learn about these things. It's so hard to understand what's being done to you if you don't understand the intricacies of these tactics like gaslighting and isolation and all of that, because there's so much that goes into it. And, and I see it all the time where guys reach out to me on my social media and they say, oh, can I have a quick chat? And they say, then I jump on a Zoom call with them and I chat to them and they say, oh, I'm in a relationship and it's not the best, and I think maybe it might be abusive. I've seen some of your stuff. Can I tell you about my relationship and you tell me if it's abusive? And they start telling me, and literally it's about 3 seconds in, like, yes, yes, it's abusive. And they
Yeah.
don't realize it because it's not physical yet, and we
Right.
associate the physical aspect. And I think if you learn, like you can see it more, and you can, it's such a hard thing because you do make excuses for the person you're with, and you don't think it's happening to you, but once you see it, then you're armed with the information and you can make smarter decisions and plan that route out because you need to plan that route out. You don't just walk out the door because
Yeah.
yeah.
And another thing I like to add to what you're saying, like being able to see the signs and recognize it. And again, this is pattern behavior. This abuse there's a pattern of behavior that is showing control, that's power and control driven. And one resource that I would recommend for everyone is the power and control wheel. If you can just go online and type in power and control wheel. And what it does is it shows you again these patterns of behaviors or characteristics or tactics of abusers. And then there's something called the equality wheel. And this shows you like the characteristics or the qualities of healthy relationships. And if you compare the two and you notice that you have a lot of those uh parts that are on the power and control wheel, the one that is unhealthy, that may be a sign that your relationship is abusive. So definitely check that out. Also, you can speak to a therapist, someone that specializes, a professional that specializes in domestic violence abuse. Connect to these resources. You can call, I have a few hotlines here. You can call the National Abuse Violence Hotline. The number here in the United States is 1-800-799-7233. Another resource that's available, especially for men, is the Momentum Alliance. And they actually provide you with strategies, again, for men to support survivors of domestic abuse. So I'll be adding more resources to the description part of this podcast episode on YouTube. I like to say to Jared, do you have any other resources that you would like to mention? And this is my second question. Tell us about what's going on with some of the work that you're doing.
Yeah. So from my side, my website is strongmenfoundation.com, and on there is a link to all of my books. I've written 7 books now on the topic of domestic abuse, narcissism, parental alienation, false allegations. They're all available on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Waterstones, whatever. If you just literally go on Amazon and pump in my name, they'll all come up. Um, I try very hard with my books to not make them horrific school textbooks. They're not this thick and contain medical jargon. They're simple to understand. They're broken down. They have real life examples, real interviews with, it's my story, but also other people I've interviewed for it. So they're really easy to digest and understand. Um, yeah, but also on the website you'll find so there's the link to all my books. There are actually courses you can do online. So I've also published courses around all of these topics. They're all linked on the website. There's a link to things like my YouTube channel where I regularly put out videos around these topics and explaining things. Yeah, there's a lot on there. There's also links to other organizations, mainly in the UK, that can help you if you're experiencing a false allegation or domestic abuse. But yeah, they're all linked there. I would suggest just starting there. And actually, in my books, I include a chapter on organizations you can reach out to globally, so people can find those as well.
Yes, thank you. And I just want to say I've read two of Jared's books, and his books are definitely also for women. You know, if you have a son, brother, nephews, being educated about how men are impacted by domestic abuse is important, because again, this is about you being able to educate others, even if you're not a victim. If you may be their first responder, so if you're able to recognize the signs and connect them to resources, again, you can help save their life. Okay, so again, I want to thank you, Jared, for joining me today for this very important conversation. My hope is that those victims out there, you continue to tell your story, restore the dignity back into yourself. And also, I want you all to know that I hope that you got a lot out of this. And I look forward to seeing you the next time we go to the other side. Thank you.